got a cheat skill in another world and became unrivaled in the real world too, Volume 1 review. It's safe to say that isekai stories are the dime a dozen, but what about stories where the protagonists can freely go between Japan and the fantasy world? Well, those are a little more unusual. Making Yen Princess new release, I got a cheat skill and another world and it became unrivaled in the real world too, Volume 1. All the more intriguing, but does it deliver an interesting story? Let's find out. The story follows high school student Yoyo Tenjo, who will spend the majority of his life being neglected by his parents and brutally bullied by people at school because of being overweight and ugly. The only happy time in Yoyo's life was when his grandfather was still alive, as he would treat Yoyo like he was his own son. In the present, Yoyo is living by himself in his grandfather's home, which his grandfather left to his grandson when he sadly passed away. When we first met our protagonist, it's fair to say that he is at rock bottom. Having been beaten up by the bullies at school, he's been fired from his part-time job because of all his injuries. This is a cycle that keeps repeating and Yoya is at his wit's end, unable to see a future in which he can thrive and enjoy in life. Punching a wall of his grandfather's house in frustration, Yoyo finds a secret passage and a doorway that leads him to a house in what appears to be some kind of fantasy world. Unknown to the house informs Yoyo that the owner has leaving it to wherever she'll first stumble upon it, so now it and everything inside it belongs to him. Yoyo can believe his eyes at the impressive collection of weapons inside the house and the extensive garden outside housing medical herbs and tasty fruit and veg. Being in this world also seems to have granted him some kind of abilities and game-like stats, which makes me feel all the more unreal to Yuya, but maybe this is the breakthrough he's needed to turn his life around. As it turns out, this is indeed the breakthrough needed, and after defeating the monster in this world, he suddenly finds himself leveling up and being granted plenty of skill points to spend. Afterwards, he goes through a transformation overnight, losing all his excess weight and turning into a handsome young man. His luck only continues when he's invited to a new high school where he's safe from the bullies, while haunting him and his opportunity to make some new friends. As far as Volume 1 goes, there isn't a lot more to it than that. Yuri splits his time between Earth and the fantasy world. Andre he never gets to do much except train and fight a couple of monsters there. And the story largely revolves around him taking his first steps into the new, happier life. I like the core concept of Yuya being able to travel between worlds, but given the lack of any real substance, I struggle to see how this has continued into being a currently 10-volume series in Japan. I think it will have made more sense as a standalone book, ending with Yuya in a much better place and having faced up to those who hurt him so much, which is more or less does. It probably also doesn't help that there isn't a lot of Yuya's personality outside of all the suffering it's been drawn. He seems like a nice guy with a lot of insecurities, but that's all we really get to see. While I enjoy the book, it would no doubt be a tough sell for most readers when there are better offerings out there. Yui being granted these abilities and turning his life around more or less overnight is an unbelievable while Outer Miko does try to justify why Yoya deserves this second chance. It's still hard to accept. The one point that works in the novel's favor is the fact that Yoya's school transfer doesn't come about because of his actions after transformation, but from having saved the headmaster's daughter from some thugs right at the beginning of the book. I like the fact that this one good deed helped turn his life around and it wasn't related to the abilities he later gained. Andre's disposity is more or less overshadowed by the fact every girl Yuya interacts with after his transformation is lusting after him, which is a big negative in my book. As previously mentioned, I got a cheat skill in another world and became unrivaled in the real world too. Volume 1 comes to the West thanks to Yen Press and it has been translated by Noboru Akimoto. The translation reads well with no issues to note. Volume 2 is set for an English release in December and Yen Press has also been releasing the manga adaptation if that's of more interest to you than a light novel. Overall, I got a cheat skill in another world. It became unrivaled in the real world too. Volume 1 is an inoffensive and rather unforgettable read. I like the concept more than the execution, which makes it incredibly difficult to recommend it to others. Unfortunately, 5 out of 10.